hello, KCIW listeners, and welcome to Curry Café. I'm volunteer Rick McNamer with your host, Ray Gary, KCIW's famous radio personality. Here at Curry Café, we put together a panel of guests, or a guest, as is in the case today, to discuss topics of interest in our community. Listeners can participate in our show by texting in questions or comments to 541-661-4098. Again, that's 541-661-4098. Before we begin, I'd like to let our listeners know that KCIW is an all-volunteer community radio station that depends on our volunteers, sponsors, underwriters, and local businesses with their generous donations to keep us on the air. If you'd like to help us out, please go to kciw.org. And speaking of support from our local businesses, KCIW and Curry Café would like to thank our sponsor, Z Clean Laundry, located at 1107 Chetco Avenue here in Brookings. Z Clean will wash and fold your laundry within 2 to 3 days after drop-off and will rush the order if you need it sooner. They also handle large loads like comforters. They offer dry cleaning and can handle linen services also. KCIW appreciates and thanks Z Clean for their generous support for community radio. Now here's Mr. Ray Gary to tell us about today's show.
Yeah, today's show is going to be incredibly interesting. We only have one guest, but he knows a lot about stuff. So I'm going to just turn the microphone over to Bill and let him introduce himself, give you his credentials and his reason why he thinks you should spend an hour of your time listening to him today. So take it away, Bill.
Thank you for the opportunity to prattle on. I grew up in Illinois, and I fell in love with the ocean, which is a bit of an odd mix there, and that we would go to Maine for summer vacations. And we would always go out fishing, and I remember looking down and seeing crabs and fish and such swimming around under the water. Under the boat, and I said to my dad and brothers, I want to go down there. And my dad had said, I'd just like to go down there and sit down there and look around. Well, between that and Jacques Cousteau and Sea Hunt and various things like that, I decided I really wanted to be underwater. So I managed to go out to California for doing my undergraduate. I happened to do a lot of work at Hopkins Marine Station. I went to Delaware for a master's, and then back to LA for my PhD, all in marine biology. Matter of fact, when I went to check out, I had all the requirements for graduation as an undergraduate. The lady said, are you doing a master's or a bachelor's? I said, a bachelor's. You have more credits in science than you do for the general ed, which I had to take 2 general ed requirements the last quarter in order to graduate. So I was steeped in the science of it. As I've said to a number of people, when I was at Hopkins, I helped teach some classes, but I was so influenced by the invertebrate zoology classes, and they would always get fresh animals. And so we never really had to take anything out of jars, and then saw things move around and feed and this and that and the other. And the people that were teaching me ended up going and talking to a fellow by the name of David Packard, as in Hewlett-Packard. And the story is that they went up to David's Big Sur house and sitting around drinking beers and said, David, we need an aquarium. We need an aquarium so people can see these animals and they really get excited about it. Apparently David wrote a check and they started with that. He kept writing checks and the Monterey Bay Aquarium got its going. That went so well that eventually they had the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, MBARI, M-B-A-R-I, and that has now evolved into a world-class, just as the aquarium is world-class, the MBARI is world-class for deep sea ROVs, remote operating vehicles, to introduce people to the incredible world under the surface. So that's kind of my eventual trip to wanting to be an ecologist, wanting to be involved in the environmental field. I retired here to Brookings 9 years ago and got deeply involved with climate change, hence my association with SOCAN, Southern Oregon Climate Action Now. I also have been very actively involved in the study of the offshore wind here, and a variety of other things. So I could probably go on for the next hour on any one of those, but I think
We'll cover
you
them
have
all.
some
We'll try to
questions.
cover them all.
You mentioned Jacques Cousteau as being one of your inspirations, and he was mine as well. I can remember I read The Silent World, and I was just, that's me. I have to do that. And then I saw the movie The Silent World, and I don't know if I'm sure you must have seen it.
Long ago, I'm sure.
Well, play it again. You'll be shocked.
Yeah.
When I learned to scuba dive, one of the first things, you don't touch the coral. Don't touch the coral with anything. Don't, make sure your octopus is not dragging. In The Silent World, they are going in these underwater caves with torches. I mean flame torches, not flashlights. And as the torches burn out, they just chuck them and move on with the next one. And then while they're traveling across the ocean or whatever, when they ran into a baby whale, they were watching it through a portal in the front, and they got too close and ran into it. I don't remember what happened to it. Somehow or other, they wound up with a pet walrus that they kept on deck. So they were not at that time meeting a standard of we would consider an ecological.
But this is Jacques Cousteau?
Jacques Cousteau.
Oh, I have never seen that movie, so I'm
He
unaware.
made 2 or 3 movies, but The Silent World was probably that was most people, I think, introduction to some of the intricacies that are going on down there.
Right.
Well, and I think he and his whole operation are very important in getting a lot of people finally interested in what's underneath there.
Right.
You
introduced him to a lot of the critters, the fish, the
Yeah.
communities.
Yeah.
Definitely.
When I was a kid, we used to go to a beach that had poles in the water for some reason. That maybe there used to be a dock there or something. My favorite thing to do was to get on my snorkel and mask and just sit and watch the pole and all these different critters that are wandering in and around there. Is unbelievable.
One of the nice things about that is the lesson of just sit and watch.
Yes.
I don't want to steal your thunder at your show, but one of the best dives I ever had, I was in the Keys, and I would always get on the boat by myself, so they match you up with somebody, and I said, who knows how to navigate? Because I was terrible at that. And this woman raised her hand, and we sat down and talked, and we turned out we had a common interest of just like sitting and watching the coral and looking at all those critters and everything. So part of the way through the dive, she indicated she was going to go up top to see where the boat was so we could find our way back. And I just sat there for about 5 minutes, and in no time at all, a moray eel swam right across my knees, and then there was a nurse shark and 2 turtles. That's an amazing dive for Florida or any place in the States, but that's just sitting and waiting.
Yeah. I think one of the best introductions that I was able to provide, Vicki, my wife, she had arranged some travel that we had, and it happened we were in Fiji. It was at a resort that had blasted a cut through the fringing reef. And so as we started out, she was a little bit nervous, but I convinced her to keep going. We got out onto the reef. It was about maybe 3 feet of depth, and it was warm water. She had a wetsuit on, so we both did, so he couldn't sink, and so she felt very comfortable. She's like many people, not real that comfortable in the water. Mm-hmm. I had a hard time getting her out because, just like you said, I said, just quiet, and things started moving around, and you start looking around, and you see all these creatures, and you see the little fish come out, and the shrimps coming out, and all that, and you realize that if you don't move, it's like being in the middle of a very, very nice aquarium.
Yeah,
it's fantastic. All 3 of us have had this scuba diving, or mine was mostly snorkeling. But you're right. I got lost if I went out there. Just even snorkeling. I was in Okinawa at the time, and there's a lot of coral reefs there, and it is amazing that it's a big show, and you can just kind of forget where you're at and just sit there and enjoy the show of all the beauty and the nature that's around you.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I try to get through. I've done my beachcombing and tide pooling talk for a couple of years now. I'm going to do it again on the 2 weeks from yesterday, on the 15th, over at the Crissy Field Visitor Center.
Oh.
And they've asked me to do it again. I think it's the 5th of September. So, and one of the things that I try to convey to people on those is to go slow and just look down.
Yeah.
And in fact, the last couple of days, 2 or 3 days, as we went down, the tide's low in the morning, and it looks like a racetrack when you see where all the little crabs and snails, and there were lots of starfish out, but they had trails down there. At first, we were wondering who was riding a big tire beach bike down there. But they're little tires, and we realized that those are all crabs and going all over. And if you pay attention, you can very often find them still sitting up in the sand. Mm-hmm. And so if you don't pay attention, you may walk on them. So it's a good idea to avoid that. Mm-hmm. But just seeing what all's there and then slowing down, we picked up a beach hopper this morning, a bunch of little starfish. We yesterday found a worm that was crawling around in the sand, which to people that didn't do the last lecture or talk that I gave over at SOC may not appreciate the beauty of worms, but
we do now, those of us who were there. I'm telling you, great stuff, man. Yeah. Really interesting. And I happen to live very close I'm on the California side, but I happen to live very close to Crissy Field. I go there at least 4 or 5, maybe 6 times a week. It's a great little place. Plus, I'm always fascinated by where any river meets the sea, and the Windchuck River is right there.
Yeah.
And just all the different, forms of life that you see there.
Yeah. And what I find amazing about the Windchuck in particular, but all the way around from, of course, day to day, you have high tides and low tides.
Yeah.
And week to week, things seem to change when the tides are high or when they're low. But how the sand moves, and how the channel to the Windchuck moves, and how the kelp was heavy this morning. And 2 days ago, there was hardly anything there where we were.
Oh, wow.
And so just the amount of change from day to day, much less month or season to season, it's incredible.
It is amazing. I mean, I'm trying to guess the distances. I've taken a couple little Facebook videos myself, but sometimes the Windchuck, where it meets the ocean, can be, I've seen it different, if that's the right word, differentiate where it comes out.
Yeah.
Almost like a quarter mile, maybe more.
More, I'm sure.
It's amazing how that, and then, you see where it was at one time and then where it's going the next time. It's pretty wild. And then last year, I don't know if it's going to happen this year or not, at one time the Windchuck didn't quite make it to the ocean.
Yeah.
And was sitting there for, I think, about a month.
Yeah.
Obviously seeping down through the sand to get there eventually. But yeah, it's just...
Yeah, that's been an annual event for the 9 years we've been here. Actually, longer than that. So it's you kind of expect that soon the water flow is going to slow down, and then the tide and the winds are going to be, and the waves are going to close it off, and then we have Lake Windchuck. It fills up, and then at some point when we have a rain, then it'll break through, and it's hard to say where it's going to break through or when it's going to break thugh.
Right.
So.
Fun to guess when I'm down there sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and of course, right now I do notice that it's a buildup now of a lot of algae or whatever that material is.
Yeah.
I guess the closer we get to, or it's going to continue until it breaks through. Well, it is broken through now, but it's slowing down pretty good.
Yeah, I think it depends on what kind of waves and what kind. Right now, there's supposed to be a gale offshore, which would expect.
It was
some
whipping
winds.
up today. I noticed a lot of white caps out there.
Yeah, and so that, I mean, I don't know how the geology and beach morphology changes,
right?
Except that it changes a lot, and it changes fast, surprisingly.
Oh man, yeah. Especially when those king tides are around.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
By the way, text in questions or comments 541-661-4098. Going back to Monterey Bay, Bill. Number one, that aquarium is, like you've said, world class. It's got to be one of the best in the world. I've been there once, and I felt lucky to have seen all that awesome stuff that's there.
Yeah. Yeah, they're groundbreaking on what they've done. It was interesting. I mentioned about how they had talked David Packard into funding to start the first phases of it. They tasked him as an engineer. He's an outstanding engineer. And so one of the things that they really wanted to do was to have, well, you might have seen touch tanks where you have some anemones and some starfish and maybe a stingray or things like that there. But what they tasked David to do was to have a dissecting scope, which is a low-power microscope that was then hooked up to a camera, a video camera. And so it would be what it's looking at is shown on a screen. And he had the tough part was that it would be moved with gimbals and screws and everything. So it could go anywhere in that touch tank would be maybe 5 feet by 5 feet. So people could zoom in on a lot of these tiny little animals, fan worms or the barnacles or other things that you normally would never get to see. And because it was remote, you would be able to you could see how they're acting without having to pick them up and disturb them and everything. And so the challenge of that with salt water and electronics and the animals, keep them right, was pretty significant. But that was the kind of engineering that went into their two-story tall kelp tank and all of that sort of stuff. So by doing it the right way, getting the engineering right, you ended up with, again, it started off as a world-class and has continued to be a world-class facility.
Right.
And spawned all sorts of people like me that goes, this stuff is neat. It's definitely worth getting involved in.
Yeah.
Whenever I go to one of those places there, or some of my favorite places in the Everglades on the boardwalks and stuff, there's always school kids coming through with their teacher, screaming and yelling and in the Everglades, they're just being a pain to me. But of the 10 or 15 kids that come walking through there, I kind of watch them, and every now and then you see a couple that get it. Yeah, they realize they're in something special, and they realize that, wow, that's a this or that's a that. The funny thing is they always call them crocodiles. So a few years ago, I was in Africa, and there's a bridge where you're allowed to walk across the river covered with crocodiles. And these people who are obviously Americans, and the little kids said, look at the alligators. I said, well, okay.
No, those are not friendly alligators. They're not friendly crocodiles either.
I don't think there's any of those around.
Well, there actually are crocodiles in the Everglades. Not very many, but most of them are alligators.
They're the only place where crocs and alligators live in the same place.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Okay, that I didn't know. Saltwater crocodiles are.
I don't know. No, I don't. I think saltwater.
Well, it doesn't matter. They're
I think
crocodiles.
saltwater crocodile is a separate species.
Yeah, I guess.
These look pretty much the same as alligators, except they're a different color and their face is shaped a little different.
Okay.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised at that too.
Oh, okay.
So.
I'm going to jump back again to Monterey, one of my favorite places, but not only the aquarium, it's right next to one of the most unique places of the ocean with that very deep canyon that goes there and causes all kinds of... I read about it before I went to the aquarium. There's an article in the paper about, they talked about that, and there was just at one point so many different species of sea life, whales, dolphins, everything, and that was happening at once because of that upwelling, and that got me to finally go, because the last time I was on a boat many years before that, I got deathly ill.
That's fun.
But I called it's kind of a tour group there at Moss Landing to say, okay, can you give me some benefit or how to avoid seasickness? I did everything they told me, and I was fine on the boat twice.
There you go. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the Monterey Canyon's interesting because it is deeper than the Grand Canyon. So, because it's right near shore, and there's actually a branch that's to the south is the Carmel Canyon. And so, what's amazing about that, and what's for the real benefit to MBARI with their deep sea rovers. ROVs can do is they don't have to go very far offshore, and they get into very, very deep water, 2-3
it drops
miles.
Quick, doesn't it?
Yeah. And because of that, they can get a wide variety of species that are sort of coming down from the north and to some extent coming up from the south, but different habitats because the sunlight can only penetrate so far. Then you can get down to areas where there's really no more sunlight and look at the animals that are there. And that was one of the things that if you go to MBARI, I think it's probably embari.org. But it's if you go to that, they have an amazing array of videos and educational information that is it's based on thousands and thousands of hours for couple decades, 3 decades, I think, of these ROV recordings. And so then they also have very good teachers, and they are able to pick out the important stuff, the interesting stuff. The other thing that I really noticed is watching them, you could tell the people that were doing that were, as I say, and I claim to myself, being a marine invertebrate nerd. Because when they start talking about, they're so exciting. They say, look at.
That was funny during your presentations. You had a few of those. It just cracked me up. But I get it, man.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
They might look like something out of a sci-fi movie to a lot of people, but it's really down there doing its thing, and it's amazing to watch. No wonder they get excited on stuff like that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that was one of the things that I wanted to do, why I put those 4 talks together for the college this last month, was to show people what's down there and to get an understanding of what is it that we need to protect? What are things that are being proposed, and what do we need to make sure that if things happen, we're aware of both what's being proposed and what are the consequences of that, instead of just going in and, whole hog do whatever we want because we can. So
Yeah. Because you say because we can, simply, and we're unfortunately our track record on some of that is not good.
That's an understatement. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because one of the things that was, I think they came across pretty well, the animals that live in the midwater, not on the bottom and not up at the surface, but are living in the constant darkness, they can be very, very delicate animals. Well, they're not exposed to waves, they're not really exposed to currents and things, so they can be. You could have some things that are related to jellyfish that are just this long string of individual animals, siphonophores is what the whole thing is called. And they're related to Portuguese man-o-war and such. And what's amazing, what early on the oceanographers and marine biologists that would try to sample those things would take a big net and drag it behind the boat and bring up what they could. But when you take something that is incredibly delicate, that's 30 feet long, and if you bump it, it'll fall apart into individual pieces, you're never going to have appreciation for what's there. And with these ROVs, they can take a full picture and take up-close videos and that sort of stuff to realize just how important or how incredibly complex they are. There's another thing, they are called larvaceans, and you might have remembered in last week or Thursday, they talked about the larvation houses. And the larvaceans are interesting. They are part of hemichordates, and those are as close to us as anything else in the ocean.
Amazing.
So any other invertebrates. Now, these guys are interesting because they produce these larvation houses. And what it is basically is they secrete a mucus net, and actually 2 mucus nets. So they have one that filters out the stuff that's too big for them to eat, but an inner one that is captured the stuff that fits with them. And so then they will direct that down and they will eat that stuff. And the stuff is called marine snow, and it's characterized as dead algae, dead animals, animal poop, various other things
Decaying whales, I think
exactly
that type of stuff.
So all the stuff that is going to be raining down on the bottom, which still has a lot of energy, a lot of nutritional value, if that's what you're trying to do. And the interesting thing about it is they noted that when the filters get filled up, they'll just abandon them and swim away. And then that abandoned larvation house will slowly but surely drift down to the bottom, and that ends up being food for the animals that live down at the bottom. And so it's an interesting way of getting energy that's captured up at the surface and then consumed up there and moved down or reused ultimately down to the bottom. And that carbon that was pulled out of the air by the phytoplankton to then be food for other things and gets down to the larvation house, gets down to the bottom, then gets pushed into the sediments. And that's part of the carbon cycle. And that's over a long period of time getting carbon dioxide out of the air.
Yeah.
Which right now we need in spades.
Yes, we do. Boy.
So.
Well, again, you text in our questions or comments, 541-661-4098. And we are about halfway. It goes fast when we have good guests. Thank you, Bill. But I just want to say we are at the halfway point, and I'd like to remind our listeners that you're listening to KCIW LP 100.7 FM in Brookings, Oregon. We are an all-volunteer community radio station. If you'd like to be part of KCIW as a volunteer, whether you would like to help out with a donation, assist us with technical skills, or even host your own radio program, please visit our website at kciw.org and click Get Involved. We'd love to have you as part of the KCIW, you got to remember it, KCIW team. Thank you. So you talked, Bill, and we've had before, keystone species. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are millions, thousands, whatever, of species, but what are some of the major keystone species on the animals that you pretty well study mostly?
Yeah.
And I guess you could go, I mean, there's a lot, but like main ones?
Well, one of the there are a couple of good examples of starfish that are being impacted strongly very recently. There's the sunflower sea star that is a voracious predator. It is very active. It can be up to 2 or 3 feet in diameter. Unlike a regular sea star with 5 arms, it can have 20 or more, and it will feed on pretty much anything it can catch. It particularly likes urchins, it likes abalone, it likes various other things like that. Because it was very, very significantly affected by, for about the last decade, the sea star wasting disease. And the cause of that, among other things, apparently was a type of Vibrio bacterium. And by the way, a different species is what is for humans is tissue-eating bacteria?
Oh, yeah.
So it's, in this case,
macabre.
it's something in the ocean that made the tissues of many different sea stars, at least 20 different species, just dissolve, just fall apart. And we had some pictures of them in the talk 2 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And the reason that that's really important is that because they have a very significant appetite, they were keeping the urchins in check. Now, the urchins are very good herbivores. They'll crawl around and eat kelp. And the kelp here, the bullwhip kelp that we have, are annuals. So every year they fall apart and wash up on shore, and then the next spring they'll start putting out new shoots and bringing on to the next generation of the kelp. Problem is, if you have no sea stars, then you end up having lots of these sea urchins. And the sea urchins are hungry, so they're cruising around and eating anything they can find. In doing that, they get rid of the kelp. And now with no kelp, then that has cascade effects on the fish that would normally be living in the kelp, the animals living on the kelp that the fish are going to be eating. And in fact, we've got an interesting situation here in Port Orford where the gray whales that you expect to see going up and down the coast, so going north in the spring, there is a group that stays in Port Orford. Now, the interesting thing, and we can talk about this a little bit more, but the gray whales within the last couple of years have been starving. And especially this last year, PBS had several articles about that. And so our question is, why are they starving? Interesting thing about the gray whales, unlike most of the other baleen whales, the filter-feeding whales, they have a special way of feeding, is that instead of opening their mouths and cruising through the water, they will go down to the bottom, open their mouths, suck in a lot of sediment, and then filter out the animals that are in there, the amphipods. A problem with that is they're usually doing that up in the Arctic. Well, with the heating of the Arctic, with the reduction in the amount of sea ice that's up there in the Arctic, the phytoplankton that normally would grow under the sea ice and be, when they would they would die. They rain down onto the bottom. And the amphipods that live down there would be able to have plenty of food. Those would be the food for the gray whales. When there's not as much sea ice, then those phytoplankton are going to be consumed before they get to the bottom. And so the gray whales that are used to eating the little animals, the amphipods that are on the bottom, they're not there. Now, the interesting thing about the gray whales, as they migrate down to Baja, reproduce, and come back up north, they don't eat. So they have to have as much food in their bellies, in their systems, to survive that long, long travel. And because of that, they exhibit odd behavior in terms of going into San Francisco Bay, which is bad primarily because
reading about that too, yeah.
All the traffic that goes through the Golden Gate,
gosh.
A lot of animals are going to get hit. And so you have ship strikes. The other thing is that they're washing up on shore, where they are going to be affected by. They're identified as starving, basically.
Yeah.
And so the sort of coming back to at Port Orford, there's a little group there that has changed their behavior a little bit, but they're still living, instead of traveling on up north, they're eating the animals that are going to be associated with kelp. Well, as the kelp are lowered, then they're going to have less of what they're adapted to eating locally. So even thinking that you have a cascade effect from a loss of the sea stars affecting the kelp, affecting what animals living on the kelp, which is what the local gray whales are eating.
Yeah.
So it is again a cascade effect. Now, a keystone species, you'd say, is the sunflower sea star,
Right.
Because changing it will change so many different components to that system.
Yeah. I mean, a little sea star to affect these huge, beautiful, I'm a whale fan, as you know, but to affect that's it's tragic and sad. I think, was this year a little worse for whale deaths than?
From what I understand, yeah.
I kind of thought that too.
Yeah.
Which is, not good news. I do want to read a text. Thank you. We got a text, and thank you. And the texter says, Bill, I've been reading about this year's super El Niño emerging in the Pacific Ocean, and that it may be the strongest El Niño on record later this year, which is a direct consequence of climate change. The article suggests that we could have 6 straight months of record-breaking sea surface temperatures. How could this affect the sea life off the Oregon, NorCal coast and elsewhere? I love your passion for protecting our environment and all the creatures in it. Thank you. Thank you, texter. And we do know that Bill has passion.
Well, thank you for the
flows
text.
to
I
us,
appreciate
but go
that.
ahead.
And I completely support what your questions are and your concern. One of the interesting things about the El Niño is it is a very complex cycle that is, people say, oh, well, climate change is just natural cycles. It's, yep, there are natural cycles, but there are cycles that are kind of in balance, and there are cycles that are out of balance. And if you continue to put more and more and more heat into the atmosphere, majority of it, somewhere between 90 and 95% of the heat that's gone into the atmosphere has gone into the ocean. And it's clearly the upper surface of the ocean, but it's permeating down into the middle layers and below. Now, the reason I sort of go into that is because there are natural variations in when El Niño happens and La Niña happens. On average, it's 7-year cycle. Sometimes it's 11 years. Sometimes it's 3. How the significant, substantial amount of heat that's gone into that ocean is going to change how often various things happen with El Niño and the secondary and tertiary consequences. It's open to guess. The only thing that's certain is that there's a lot more heat in the ocean. With the extra heat, that means it will lose water more quickly, which means it's not that we're going to run and suddenly not have water in the oceans, quite the contrary. We're going to have a lot of water up in the atmosphere. And as it evaporates up, it's taking a lot of energy up there. So you're going to have more opportunities for more water to come cascading down. In El Niño, because it's off the western coast of North and South America, it's going to end up with the monsoons and the basically the hurricanes that are going to push off over the Pacific. And so Japan, China, and Indonesia and various places like that they're experiencing the much heavier storms. It's because many of those places are very low-lying. A small amount of storm surge, a lot of rain can have massive impacts over large areas. Trying to think back in terms of other impacts, the suggestion is because there are a lot of components to it, but the suggestion is that I think we would be drier here in the Pacific Northwest, and in Southern California it would be wetter, I believe, which if it's wetter in the right places at the right time and the right amount, then that'd be a good thing. If it's all at once, as could be the case, and you end up supercharging storms, then our systems for handling rainwater runoff are not for that. They were engineered for the last 30 years. And the last 30 years, for all the efforts that Exxon and other oil companies have said, this is ridiculous, it's not real at all, when their own scientists, we've got the reports, their own scientists said this is going to happen. And what's going to happen is we're going to have extreme weather events. And so it all ties in together with the extra heat there in the off basically on the equator, going off South America, going to the west. Another aspect of that is kind of rambling, but because I am I love the coral reefs.
Yes.
And I think it was last Thursday I showed a picture that was done by NOAA, and it was a map that shows the chances of coral bleaching. And the map showed not quite the highest, but almost the highest for coral bleaching in the area that is measured for El Niño. And so you can see that it is incredibly hot, and that has a variety of effects, including driving some species that would live in the tropics farther north or farther south, closer to the poles, which means a good example is the Humboldt squid. Humboldt squid are about 4 or 5 feet long, plus their tentacles. They are voracious predators, and I'm not sure who figured this out, but apparently they're aggressive towards humans.
Okay.
And they are one of the primary sources for commercial squid. When you've got a bell the animal is 5 feet long, you get a lot of squid steaks out of that. So
and it can be good.
And it could. Oh, I love it. I think it's great.
Too. Okay.
But as it moves farther north, coming up to where we are, as they will feed on all sorts of things, fish that we would like to eat, like salmon, they are going to affect what fish our fishermen are going to be able to catch. And so there's various things like that. As that warmer water will be moving, species will be getting to where they'll move to where their water is cool for them. So some of them are going to be escaping the hot water. Others are going to be taking advantage of the hot water in new places to feed in new areas. So the direct effects, the reason I'm sort of bouncing around is having listened to a talk by a expert on El Niño, said it's just way complicated. We don't really know what's going to happen.
That's the general idea that I've been listening to. Yeah. It's really coming, but we don't know what the heck's going to happen when it does get here.
Which is really scary. Because
it is scary.
There's not much you can
We
plan
could
for.
get hit with drought here, or we could get hit with storms. Is that?
Yeah. When you look at the history of El Niños, and so what was common under the previous El Niños would be say, well, that might happen again. And again, I believe that there's more, or would be projected less rain in the Pacific Northwest, more rain down in the California, Baja area. But that's based on past experience when things weren't so off kilter. They were so out of the norm. So it's like, that could happen, but because you've pushed it way out of the average, who knows?
And this big domino effect, and back to the more rain. We think about droughts in our reservoirs that, like right now, Lake Mead and
Lake Powell.
Yeah, Lake Powell.
Yeah.
They're in dire situations right now.
Right.
But the more rain doesn't actually equate the more snowpack, which is what we all really need. I believe. I'm going mostly on the West Coast here.
Right.
That's because that's where we live.
That's right.
And also, I don't hear too much good news worldwide. Every time I see a report, whether it's from the Arctic, Antarctic, or Europe, or the Mediterranean, I don't see any real positive news coming out like, oh, this is getting better, this is getting better.
Well,
I hate to be what do they call negative Nelly, but that's kind of the way it sounds these days.
The first 10 minutes of the news every morning is where this tornado hit and where this is flooding and where this
Right.
SUV got picked up and thrown away. And
Yeah.
and I'm sitting there in my T-shirt and looking out of the view.
Well,
And the rest of the country is either burning up or flooding up or...
Right. That's why it's amazing. You only have to look at the rest of the U.S. to see where forest fires are, where you have unhealthy air because of the forest fires.
Oh,
you have the
that's a
drought.
big
You
deal.
have, floods. I do a talk on the effect of the extra warmth in the oceans, and so it's all about this.
yeah.
I'm thinking about doing it at one of our SOCAN monthly meetings. I've done it enough times so that I keep being asked by different people to do it again. But it sort of ties in together the thing of just the amount of extra heat that's been pushed into the ocean has this whole series of effects. The most clear one is you have hotter water, which means that you have more water that gets evaporated up. All right. And extra water means there's more water to come down. So you have higher floods. You have, because it means some of the clouds are not moving as fast, they'll sit. And Texas has had some real experience with that, where the 100-year floods are coming every, 5 years, certainly 10 years.
Yeah.
And our infrastructure is not set up for that.
Right.
And we need to do the planning for what happens when it is worse flooding, or where do we have to have our roads, or what do we have to have our sewage plants and things like that. But if there are significant parts of our country and significant people in power that say that climate change is a hoax, it's like that's rejecting basically all the science, certainly for the last 40 years on this. And so if we want to be like ostriches and stick our heads in the sand and hope that the lion doesn't eat us, well, we're not going to notice the lions are circling.
Yeah.
So I guess it's still greatly in contention, at least by the people you just mentioned, how much of this is man-made.
That's one of the arguments that they make about it. But
we all know it's China trying to ruin our economy, so they have spread that rumor.
I'm trying to figure out how the logic no, wait, there isn't any.
This doesn't have to be logical. The people that are saying it
I know.
Seem to throw logic out the window whenever we talk about it.
It seems to be a lot of these people that, again, the fossil fuel industry, let's go there.
Yep.
You know that they know that it's really happening. These are a lot of smart people that run these companies. This is my thought anyway. Mm-hmm. And it's a short term. They can't make that short-term investment maybe. They want that short-term investment for whatever, more drilling. And I don't think they even really care about the possible actions that's going to take.
Well, they're actually not doing much more drilling right now. However, they are making the largest profits. If you look at the last quarter profits, they are just obscene, highest they've ever made.
The greatest profits ever made by any corporation in the history of the earth, but we need to subsidize them so they fucking do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's not just the companies that are making their profits, it's the individuals that are
of course,
running them.
Yeah.
And so there's... let's see if I can remember the details, but there was a book called Ministry of the Future, and by Kim Stanley Robinson. It was written just before COVID, so give a time frame. And it starts with, it was 2025 that it was the opening scene of a fellow that was in India, and he was experiencing this massive mortality event because it was so hot in India. And it's like, I hate to say it, but he's describing what is happening right now.
Well,
And so Stan was interesting because he came and gave a talk for us, and he has continued to be in great demand as a speaker. He's an excellent speaker, a really bright guy. And I'll get the name wrong specifically, but it's something, the German word Gotterundum, something like that. And basically it's about the gods. And the gods say that if I can't have it, I'm going to tear it down. And I can't help but feeling that is what the oil companies are saying. That's what the Trump administration is saying. That's what the people that have all the money, the Elon Musks, are saying.
Yeah.
If I can't have it, I'm going to make it so bad that nobody has anything because I don't care. That's where I have the problem with the politics.
I think we all have that problem. And it's almost, it's hard to understand anybody would really be that way.
Right. Yeah. How can it be that you're so concerned about your own personal wealth? It's inconceivable how you can need that much money.
Yeah, your own personal wealth is way beyond anything you'll ever have any use for.
Correct.
What are you going to, well, like Trump wanted to buy Greenland. Maybe that you could do that. He could buy it for himself.
I don't know about buy, but take over one. Yeah. I mean,
There's probably
it's crazy
wonderful
stuff.
sites there for seafront resorts.
Yeah, for the part that 3 months of the year where it's not land or ice locked.
Well, then there'd be icefront resorts.
There you go.
Well,
So
yeah. Speaking of the ice, the Arctic and the Antarctic, all I keep hearing is there's less and less ice pack every year.
correct. And that's why it was interesting with the less ice pack in the Arctic, as it's not staying around as long, so that has a direct impact to why we're seeing whales along the East Coast, along the West Coast here, wash up.
Yeah.
And so, that's just one small part of a very complex ecosystem that we're thinking about.
Yeah.
I recall an estimate that one fellow that had been looking into it, if there were not the ocean there, the fact that the average temperature in the ocean is roughly 59, 60 degrees, something like that, Fahrenheit. If it weren't for the ocean sucking up almost all that heat, it would be about 120 degrees in our atmosphere.
Yeah.
Which clearly, if that's the average temperature, and right now it's a little less than 60, it would make the Earth uninhabitable. So we have a lot to thank for that ocean, but we have to also think it can't sustain this immense heating as we've got.
Yeah. And
Okay, now we need to get to somebody met somebody and they all lived happily ever after. What's your optimistic view of all this?
We need
positive points
Yes.
that are out there.
Well, I just got back from doing a day on Capitol Hill lobbying our senator and our two coastal representatives, as well as the senator from Hawaii. And there was an undertone of, once we get sanity back, we will then be able to start taking some actions. And it's a matter of continuing to do what we can. I was part of Citizens Climate Lobby. And Citizens Climate Lobby, I've got a shirt of theirs, and that said, the solution for climate change, democracy. So what we need to do is we need to get people that are representing us in Washington, in Salem, anywhere here in Curry County to represent what we know is happening. So the vote is critically important. Now, I'm not going to endorse any individual candidate.
Of course.
501c3 and KCIW can't do that.
That's right.
But certainly having having people that accept science, accept that we have to know what information is, we have to know what information we know and not ignore information that we don't know and assume that because we don't know it, it doesn't happen. I was asked at the question and answer on Thursday my opinion about offshore wind. And I believe I'd have to ask Michael for looking at it again. But basically I said we need information. We need to find out what were the drivers for having it proposed out here at all. When I was working as an environmental consultant, I actually wrote a paper for Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, BOEM. And what it was doing was to look at the benefits of how you capture the benefits of offshore wind. Now, this is offshore wind, East Coast, West Coast, Gulf Coast, Hawaii, but how you do that in an environmental impact statement. And it was not easy because if you have an environmental impact, if you put a project in a field, it's going to affect birds, it's going to affect this and that because it's a direct impact. The benefits are much more difficult to see. Now, in 2022, the Oregon Department of Energy put together a report that was required by the legislature to look at the benefits and the drawbacks, the challenges and the issues around offshore wind. And if anybody's interested, I would strongly recommend that you take a look at that because it was very well balanced. In stark contrast to the information that has typically been cited and recited and talked about in the conversations. And I have to admit, there's not a small part of me that thinks that maybe people on the West Coast were also being funded by the same people that were funding a lot of the opposition on the East Coast, because I think it was Brown University that did a study that found that there was lots of dark money that was coming, ultimately could trace back to oil and gas companies that wanted to make sure that there was no offshore wind there.
Yeah.
And now with Trump having said, if you give me $1 billion, I'll give you everything you want. And now he's buying off the companies that were to the point of finishing off some of these offshore wind farms. So the issue here, the reason it's off our shores, is that when I did that paper, I realized I ran across the statistic that what's off our shores all the way down to Mendocino is some of the best wind for offshore wind energy development.
Right. We are a kind of a unique area for that, to where if we had it, that would be the best place to have it.
Right. So
what about the view, though?
Well,
taking away a beautiful ocean view.
How often can you see the horizon? Because they would be 30 miles off.
Don't you talk logic to me.
I know that.
This is my show.
Yes. But that's,
well, for that, but yeah, I know what point Ray is making, and yeah, and like anything different, we might have a couple of negatives, but overall, what's the benefit of forget everything and keep drilling for oil?
Right. Well, that's why there are parts to it, and beyond, I don't want to dismiss the view for a couple of reasons. One is if you're making your living by having people enjoy this unspoiled view, then that's a personal direct impact. Moreover, I think a more important thing is for the Native Americans that have been here for time immemorial, and that's part of their culture and all that. That has to be considered, exactly.
Yeah, because they've never been considered in the past for most other things.
Correct.
I agree with that.
And so it's easy to dismiss it. Well, you won't see it. Well, you will see it, especially at night. And so, but most of the time you won't. I will say I saw and have a copy of a picture that somebody, a very serious senior person, made of what these would look like. And it was the most awful, worst example of disinformation. As opposed, I say distinction between disinformation and misinformation.
Yes.
Misinformation is what somebody perpetuates on unknowingly that it's wrong. Disinformation is where they're purposefully lying.
Yeah.
And he did that, and then it got posted to websites that were generally available to the public, and they said, oh, this is what's going to happen. It's like, absolutely not.
No. I remember one particular SOCAN meeting, I think that you posted a picture of what it would actually look like. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. With the social media, it's hard to battle some of that stuff.
And frighteningly now, with AI, you can make anything, do anything. And so it really does require us to have civil conversations. It's the sort of thing that if we can say, this is where I got this information, and not attack each other and say, well, that's stupid. Say, well, why did you come to that? Actually have civil conversations. And you've had Michelle Carrillo on your show.
Yes, we have. Wonderful lady. Wonderful.
And she is incredibly good. She was the driving force for the Coalition for Common Ground.
Yeah.
And that's where we're trying to do a variety of things, one of which is to start to talk to people that are the others, in quotes.
Yes.
And a lot of time, the others are simply people that haven't been consulted or haven't been informed or aren't aware, but are actually interested.
Yeah.
Because dismissing somebody's opinion or experience is doesn't benefit anybody. Having to take people into what their impacts are, what their values are, is critically important. And so I will say one thing about the offshore wind impacts on the view. There was a study that followed up for the early offshore wind that were a lot closer to shore in Massachusetts and Rhode Island.
Okay.
And they found that there were actually people that said they came there to see them. And their the commercial recreational fishermen would take people out because they are fish attracting devices.
Yeah, they're reefs.
Yeah. And so there are, when the opposition is throwing out all these things that are bad, and there's nobody saying, yeah, but wait a second, here are the benefits. One of the things about the benefits for offshore wind here were that we are literally at the end of the extension cord from the Bonneville dams.
Yeah, living in Smith River, I know about being at the end of the various other things, but go ahead. True.
And what's interesting about that for that situation is you are still paying off the costs of the 2 weeks worth of generators that were the diesel generators that are brought in when you guys lost power for 3 weeks.
Over a week?
Yeah.
Yeah, been a while. But it was a long time then, I remember.
And so it was, people were, Michelle apparently has a small farm, and she said that for a week she lost a lot of things and all. Yeah. Many other people had that. And then they're still paying off the cost of hiring those generators. So the impacts are significant, they are substantial, but we need to be working together and talk about what is it that we need to protect. How do we do that?
What I've heard about those generators is, see, they just brought in generators.
Yeah.
Like, generators appeared.
Yeah.
And ran for free.
And and that's just it.
Yeah.
They ran for free till the bill comes.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I got to tell you, man, we are running out of time, but I want to, your comment about civil discourse, I think that's huge. And everything these days, that's becoming harder and harder, it seems like. Mm-hmm. But that I agree, that's what we need.
Yeah.
Get people on the other side, but let's not start being flamethrowers at each other.
No. Yeah.
And it's for the overall good of everybody.
You can't have that happen when one side is telling you they need to be burned out. They need to have flame thrown at them.
Yeah, for sure.
That's why all about the internet and the ability to say whatever you want, whenever you want, without any repercussions.
I'm addicted to YouTube, I'm embarrassed to admit. And some of the things you see on there are just unbelievably incredible.
And everybody can be an expert for a couple of seconds or a few minutes.
I think it's appropriate, the word you use, it's incredible. It's not credible. Mm-hmm. So it's unbelievable. That's right. Can't believe it.
Exactly.
So
okay, well, we're running down the time. Bill Gorham, I just thank you for coming back, and you're always welcome here, as you know. And the SOCAN group is a nice group to belong to also here.
So if anybody wants to join in, you can email me at bill@SOCAN, SOCAN.eco, eco. So it's bill@SOCAN.eco.
Okay, and come and join us. Thank you, Bill, and everybody. You were listening to KCIWLP 100.7 in Brookings, Oregon. And thanks for listening. Okay, thanks again, Bill, for being our guest.